Hello everybody, my name is Kat Bowser. I'm your resident fantasy therapist and welcome to my channel. Those of you who are here for the first time, welcome. Those of you who are returning, welcome back. Glad to see you again. For those of you who are new, my name is Kat Bowser. I am a licensed therapist and I'm also an author working on my first novel. And on my channel, I like to dig into what I consider to be the heart of writing, which is the characters. And the heart of the characters lies in their psychology. So you will find all kinds of different topics on my channel, all from a therapist point of view, a psychological point of view. So this video for today is the next in a series I've been doing where I take popular character or plot or story tropes and I kind of dig into the psychology and the truth behind it. So for today, we're tackling one that actually was brought up on Twitter among some conversations about science fiction and fantasy movies. And it's actually one that I have seen a lot in fairy tales as well, and that is the death by broken heart trope. You guys have probably all heard of this trope in one way or another. It's also called death by despair. I've heard it called the ever popular dying of a broken heart, which is that's the term I first heard it by. So essentially, this trope is a character who, usually through the loss of a lover, loses their will to live and passes away. You actually find this quite a bit in older tales and myths and whatnot. Actually, even Tolkien does it to some degree. That is actually how Arwen in the Lord of the Rings universe eventually meets her end. A year after the death of her husband, she dies. And it is generally accepted that it was because she willed herself to die. She died of a broken heart. So, understandably, this trope has come under some scrutiny in the later years. But you might be surprised that there is a little bit of truth behind it. But like a lot of different truths, there are circumstances. There are certain situations where it applies and certain situations where it doesn't apply. So let's dig into just the basic overall what we know of it. So what they have found over the years is that there is a condition, a physical condition of the heart that has come to be known as broken heart syndrome. I'm going to link the official description in the information below because honestly, I am really bad at pronouncing medical terms, so I'm not going to try. Let's just say it's called broken heart syndrome, colloquially. See, I can't talk today. In any event, it tends to mimic a heart attack. People usually feel short of breath, they feel a sharp pain in their chest, but it does not operate the same way as a heart attack. Typically, with a heart attack, your arteries become blocked or clogged, and so it's harder for blood to get through, and so your heart has to pump harder and harder, and eventually it stops or it has an unusual rhythm. And that's usually what we refer to as a heart attack. With broken heart syndrome, what they have found happens is there is an enlargement of one of the ventricles of the heart, which leads to cardiac arrhythmia and the other symptoms that mimic a heart attack. So what causes it? They aren't entirely sure. There are a couple of different theories, so I'll kind of go through them a little bit. The most popular one, and the one that seems to have the most research backing it, is that when someone is faced with a stressful event, the heart is essentially damaged by the sudden release of a bunch of stress hormones. Anytime we are in a stressful situation, our body releases stress hormones to ideally keep us alive. The idea is that it triggers the immune system, the adrenaline system, to get us ready to fight, flight, or freeze. But in some cases, particularly in folks who are older, which is usually where you see this more often, the heart can't exactly take the stress like it used to, especially if it's sudden and it's unexpected. Okay, so one thing to keep in mind whenever we have a massive change in our life that involves a lot of emotion, it scales differently depending on the type of event it is. And this is called the Life Change Index Scale. And it actually was originally developed in the 60s. It's gone through some revisions over the years, but it basically is a scale on about 0 to 100. And at the very bottom, you have things like, I believe like 10 to 11 is like a traffic violation, minor encounter with the law, things like that. So things that are stressful and cause a change in your life, but they're not overwhelmingly changing. And then if you go through it gradually, the events get more and more intense, they get more and more emotional. And at the very tippity top, at number 100, you will find death of a child. Underneath that, at about 98 to 99, you will find death of a spouse, death of a partner. So basically, losing a partner or someone that you love is only topped by the death of a child. It is considered the most life-changing and most emotionally stressful event that a person can go through. And there's a good reason for that. Basically, one of the things that we discuss when we're working with someone working through grief is that not only are you grieving the person you have lost, you are also grieving the person that you were, because you are no longer the same person. Because it has such a profound impact on not only who you are, but how you see things, how you view things, how you do things, that essentially the self you were with that person when they were alive is now dead as well. You have to develop a new self where you can remember and honor and enjoy those good, positive memories, but you are not the same person. And that, they think, is really what's at the heart of broken heart syndrome, is that the sudden change is so intense that the heart literally cannot take it and it malfunctions. Now, I will point out a fallacy with this. What you usually see in movies and TVs and books is usually when someone dies of a broken heart, they will usually grab at their chest like they're having a heart attack, or they will go lay down and they just won't wake up. That's not really how it presents. It does usually present fairly quickly after the death of the loved one, usually within about 2 weeks' time. It can last longer. It's one of those that really has like two key time periods: within the first 2 weeks or within 6 months. And again, there's evidence behind that too. Basically, 6 months later is usually when you develop a new routine, a new habit. That's how long it usually takes to develop a new habit. So they think that it kind of hits 6 months later because it becomes permanent. It kind of hits the brain, okay, this person's not coming back. So that's one theory on it. Another one, and this one, there is not as much research on it, but there is more research being done, and I personally find it very fascinating. You can actually look it up. It's called heart math. And the idea behind this is that our hearts are not just a pump. They give off their own electromagnetic waves. The idea is that the brain has waves that extend about 3 inches from the scalp, whereas the heart is believed and apparently under some circumstances have been measured to have electronic waves that go 3 feet out. So the idea that this presents for broken heart syndrome is that, particularly with people who have been married a long time, your heart's waves interact with your spouse's because you are usually in very close proximity to each other. And so your heart's rhythm and waves can affect and alter theirs. So the idea is that when someone has been living with someone for so long and their partner is suddenly gone, your heart is literally looking for that other electronic wave and it can't find it. So it's looking for a missing piece, so to speak. And when it can't find it, it malfunctions. Now, again, that's something that has to have a little more research done on it, but it is an interesting theory nonetheless. And then there is a third aspect, which is not just the heart, but the body in general. What they have found is that people who have lost their spouse, again, particularly if they're older, are pretty likely to follow in about a year, 6 months to a year. And I'll tell you guys a personal story with this. My grandmother passed away in 2001, and my grandfather passed away almost a year to the day when she passed. And the reason I bring this up is because it has to do with what I'm going to talk about next, and that is the immune system. My grandfather had been working since he was 14, had never missed a day of work, except for the time when he was at war in World War II. As soon as he came back, he went right back to work. And he worked until my grandmother was in a car accident and he could not work anymore. And then he retired to stay home and take care of her, which was about, I believe, 5 to 6 years before she passed. So basically, my grandfather had been working about 60 so years, something like that. Had never missed a day of work, had never really had any major illness his entire life. My grandmother passes away. Within 6 months, they found a cancer in his stomach the size of a softball. So how does science explain this? Well, basically, when we are going through grief, our immune system is affected because, like I've said in a couple other videos, the mind and the physical body are linked. They are not separate entities. They interact with one another. So when we are going through grief, it is an extremely stressful process. It takes a lot of emotional energy, and that takes a lot of the physical energy from our body. So the immune system is compromised. They have found that there is more inflammation when people are going through grief. There are more faulty immune cell formations. So in the case of my grandfather, his immune system became compromised when my grandmother passed away because he was going through grief, and they had been married almost 60 years. So the deeper the grief, the deeper the impact, essentially. So that's another form I think is often included in broken heart syndrome, although it's not quite the same thing, but I think it has enough similarities. I'm going to loop it in here. So basically, if you're going through intense grief, you can become ill. Your immune system is compromised. You can potentially die from illness that you get when your immune system is compromised. So, what are things to keep in mind if you're going to use this trope? First off, I think it's great if you use this trope. Just don't use it too much, because while there is scientific backing to it and there is scientific explanation for it, it still is not that common. And there are definitely trends for who it shows up with and who it doesn't show up with. Most of the time in fantasy stories, and honestly in most stories in general, romance and all that stuff, you're going to have folks that are usually in their physical prime. And that's generally considered to be from about 20 to about 40, 45-ish. It depends on where you live. It depends on a bunch of other factors, but that's the general accepted age range. So if you have people who are in their prime and they lose someone that they love, they're less likely to succumb to this because honestly, their body is in pretty good shape, usually. Now, does that mean that they're not going to be hurting? They're not going to be grieving? No, of course not. Of course, they're going to still be sad. They're still going to be grieving. But it's going to be less likely that they're going to have such a strong physical reaction unless there is something in play to affect that. So if this is someone who this is their first real meaningful relationship they've ever had, okay, that's believable. If this is someone who is a very codependent personality, if they literally don't know who they are without this other person, yep, that's believable too. If it's someone that doesn't have very good stress management skills, if they don't have a lot of coping skills, they don't know how to manage stress very well on a regular basis, and you've established that, okay, that's also believable. I just think these are things to keep in mind, because I think when a trope gets overused is usually when people start to dismiss it. And I think that's really what's happened with this trope, is because it has been used so often in the past, people dismiss it as, oh, well, that's fantasy, that's made up, that's not real. When in fact, there is some truth to it. And I think if we can use it in a manner that reflects that truth rather than just plow in the field with it, so to speak, then I think we're going to be a lot better off. All right, guys, so that was my digging into the dying of a broken heart trope. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you guys enjoy this content, please leave me comments below or feel free to contact me on social media. If you guys enjoy getting updates from me, do feel free to subscribe. I try to upload every Thursday and every Sunday. I do have some video requests that are in the vine, so to speak, that I will be working on. But as always, if you guys have requests that you would like me to talk about, feel free to let me know. And until next time, I hope you guys have a good one.